Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Today, playing synthesizer lead on keyboards. I think this is going to be a fun one. At least it will be for me. I've already done a rock guitar lead on keyboards and an acoustic guitar on keyboards. So this is probably going to be the final one in this series. I'm going to heavily index this episode, so if you're looking for something specific like bending or glissando, you should be able to find it. And I would recommend, if you're new to playing lead synth on keyboards, that you probably watch the whole thing. But it's up to you. I'm going to isolate my audio. And let's get going. The first thing I would recommend is that you use an unweighted keyboard. The master track for the demo that you heard, I actually played that lead synth sound from my Kronos, which is not the way to go. For the video in the demo at the beginning of this episode, I did it from the QS8, or QS7, sorry. So use an unweighted keyboard. Now, not all unweighted keyboards are the same. The speed of the keys is very important if you're going to really let your fingers rip. Using a weighted keyboard, not a good idea. You're subject to gravity there. You press down a key, it's got a weight on it, you let go of the key, the weight makes the key return to its normal position. Gravity is powerful, but it's not very fast for our purposes. This keyboard here uses a spring. And when I press down the key, it stretches the spring. When I let go of the key, the string snaps it back to its original position. I have a Korg wave station over here. It's probably a little bit out of frame for you, but that doesn't use a spring mechanism. What it uses is a hasp spring, H-A-S-P. It's just a flat piece of metal. When I press down a key, it creates a pivot point towards the center of that piece of metal, bending the piece of metal. When I let go of the key, the piece of metal wants to be straight again, so it pushes the key back down. It's fast, but it will never be as fast as a keyboard that uses a spring mechanism like this particular keyboard. Most of the other keyboards that I have that are unweighted use a spring mechanism, just like this one. Performance controls, let's talk about that. As far as pitch bend goes, for synth, I like a whole step. So you can try whatever works for you, but a whole step is usually a good way to go. Usually you're not going to bend more than a whole step during a lead line, and probably a lot less. The mod wheel, I usually assign it to vibrato. I have it pretty intense at the top of that vibrato range. But I have a lot of granularity there from the lowest amount of vibrato, or from when it is completely off, to when it's fully on. Now, there are other controllers that we could assign to our mod wheel. We could assign frequency cutoff for the filter. That's an option. I also like to use aftertouch. Aftertouch for modulation, or in this particular case, vibrato. The thing to remember about aftertouch, and it doesn't matter whether you have polyphonic aftertouch or just channel aftertouch, there's not a lot of granularity there. Remember, MIDI controllers are generally 0 to 127. And that's all happening within the space of about 2 or 3 millimeters. So it's hard to really pick a nice sweet spot. it's kind of almost on or off. With the mod wheel, I have about 2 inches of throw there. That's about 50 millimeters for our people in Europe. And so that gives me a lot more granularity. So that would be my choice, but other people like to do it different ways. Obviously, if you have a more modern keyboard with lots of sliders on it, this has 4 sliders, and I can assign them to different parameters like filter cutoff and resonance. You can use those in real time, but I think there's limited utility in that. I think the lead that I did in the demo is a pretty decent lead, and you don't really have a lot of time to affect it in other ways. If I wanted to, I could just do that in my DAW anyway. Number 3 on my list here is having a great sound. And I'm going to go through about 8 or 9 sounds on this QS7. And they're really the meat and potatoes of synthesizer sounds. You can have sounds that do all kinds of craziness and sweep, but those aren't necessarily great sounds for synth lead. For one thing, they're going to be sitting in a mix, and some of the nuance of those sounds are going to be lost. And also, if they're taking time to sweep because they're based on an LFO, I'm just not sure how valuable they are. Obviously, it's a personal choice, and you can choose to use whatever sound you want. I'm just going to go through 9 sounds. If you're not interested in these sounds, you can just skip ahead. So I have a port to lead here. This is preset 1, patch 100. Some of these sounds are monophonic and some of them are polyphonic. Generally, when you're using a portamento lead sound, it's going to be a monophonic sound. Obviously, there is such thing as polyphonic portamento, but I just don't think you're going to really be using that substantially in playing a lead line. Next, we have a classic square wave. Whenever I hear classic sounds like this, classic square, classic sawtooth, classic triangular wave, they always remind me of 70s music and 70s and 80s and some of the famous bands that were using these sounds back then. Preset 102, preset 1, patch 102, triangular wave. That's a cool sound. And as you get closer and closer to a sine wave, and a triangular wave is pretty close, it starts to sound more DX70, at least it does to me. 103, maze lead. This kind of sounds a little bit like a whistle to me. And the song, I think it's She Bop by Cyndi Lauper, kind of has a whistly sound, and this sounds a little bit like it. Number 104, BPF lead. You'll find that a lot of synthesizers will have a patch called BPF lead, and it sounds very much like this one. Stevie Winwood did a lot of lead work that used a sound that was very similar to this one. I believe he might have used a DX7, but this is a sound that sounds very close to that. Screamer, you heard at the beginning of this episode. Cool sound. Shine On. This is my favorite sound for doing mellow ballad type leads. There's a movie called Three Fugitives with Nick Nolte and Martin Short. And I don't know who the composer is on that. I should have looked it up before I did this. Maybe I'll throw it up on the screen. Beautiful song with a lead sound that sounds very similar to this. And I remember reading about it, but I can't remember now how they did it. I think they might have used a soprano sax that was controlling a synth sound. It's kind of got a flugelhorn type tone to it. It's just a beautiful sound. And I've used that a lot on ballads. Touch saw, similar to the screamer sound that I used at the beginning for the demo, but there's something else going on here. See if you can hear it. Do you hear that kind of nasally sound in there? If I play it soft, you'll hear it. That's why it's called touch saw. Based on your touch, your velocity is when it crosses over to being bright or having more of a resonant type sound. And so you can mix it together. It's a cool sound. The last sound I'm going to play for you is fuzzbox. This sounds good as a lead sound, but it sounds even better down low, I think. It has vibrato as aftertouch. Now, one thing I want to say about aftertouch, if you go back and you look at the demo, you'll see on the very last note, and I might have done it in other places, I'm using 2 fingers to hold that final note. I find with 2 fingers, remember I was telling you how the granularity there is only a couple of millimeters with aftertouch. I find that with 2 fingers, I can control that a lot better than just one trying to find that middle ground. So that's something to think about. This is a really cool sound in that it has the vibrato in aftertouch, but it also has on the mod wheel something that sounds like it's going in and out of hard sync. It's probably just a D tune. Down low, it kind of has a TB303 type sound. I could see somebody using this on a dance tune or something. It's a pretty cool sound. All right, enough for sounds. Let's go on to what effects you might consider using on your lead sounds when playing synth lead. I think probably my favorite is delay. Delay adds animation. Because if you have ping pong or multi-tap delay, it's going to add some additional elements that weren't in there. The screamer sound that I used at the beginning has that. Here it is. It's a ping pong delay. And just like I mentioned when I was talking about playing guitar, rock guitar lead, you can play a line and then stop the line and then just let the effect take over. Then, of course, you can put it in a space with some reverb. Delay does that to some degree, but you can do that more with reverb. And then, of course, chorusing for sweetening, flanging, phasing, all those other kind of effects can be very nice. We're down to our last 2 major categories. Pitch bend. There's so many There are so many ways to pitch bend. It's just crazy. Just standard pitch bending would be to play the note, take it up, and bring it back down. On one note, I'm taking it up and bringing it back down. Now, of course, you got to do that very quick when you're playing. Something to practice, obviously. Okay. The sexy bend, I talked about that. I used to use it a lot with playing saxophone on keyboards. You're playing alto or tenor sax on keyboards, you can get that sexy bend. It's just a touch of the bender. You know, I would say that the Vangelis bend is the other end of the scale, and I'm going to cover the Vangelis bend in a moment. But so the sexy bend. I would say it's half of what I usually use when I'm bending. So normally it'd be like, but when I'm doing a sexy bend. So if you're playing a riff that kind of is sexy, also the sexy bend can be somewhat slower. Another option for bending is bending up, bending down, and then bending up again. All kinds of combinations, going up, going down, or going up, going back to your center detent, and then going up again or down again. There's just so many different combinations. Multi-note bends, so I need a sound that is polyphonic. So I'm going to use this classic square wave sound. So I can hold intervals down. For guitar, it would be called double stops. For us, it's just intervals. If you have polyphonic aftertouch, what you can do is you can hold down an interval, say, of a major third, and then you can just add some aftertouch to the higher note here, which is E, and take it up a half step to F, and that would give you a perfect fourth. I've used this stuff, and I can tell you it's absolutely possible. How valuable it is on a lead line, I don't know. I don't think it added anything to it. I just wanted to see if I could do it, and you might want to try it for that purpose. Let's talk about the Vangelis bend. For the Vangelis bend, I'm going to use the Shine On sound on the QS7 here, which sounds like this. So a Vangelis bend is a very slow down bend. Now, if you look on the internet and type in Vangelis bend, I don't know if you'll come up with anything or not. It's just what I call it. But if I set it up a little bit, I think you'll hear it. If you're familiar with Blade Runner, at the beginning of the movie, when the smokestacks are putting out big bowls of flame and the cars are flying back and forward in the air, you get a lot of this. And this sound works pretty well for it. It sounds a lot like the sound on the movie soundtrack. And it's just a very slow down bend. It wouldn't be that long, But I just want to show you that that sounds like I'm going through a lot of pitches. But remember, my pitch bend is set to a whole step. When you're pitch bending that slowly, it sounds like you're going through a larger range than you truly are. Now on a CS80, if you've ever seen the CS80, you know there's a massive ribbon controller. It's like 20 inches long. So there's a lot of granularity there to bend those notes. One last time. The Vangelis bend. Last but not least, glissando. Going back to the screamer sound for this, there are many different ways to perform glissando. Now, I already talked a little bit about portamento, which is a smooth transition from one note to another note, hitting every pitch in between. So this is the porta lead sound. That's portamento. Glissando is a series of discrete pitches, usually either ascending or descending. Sounds like this. I don't think I did any downward glissandos in the demo, but I did several rising glissandos. And it's very important that you practice this because you need to be able to hit your target note and you need to do it accurately. And it seems very easy for me because I've been doing it a long time, but I'm guessing for people that are new to it, it may not be easy to hit fourths, perfect fifth, intervals, octave intervals. So it will take practice. Now there's several ways to do it with your hands. A lot of old-time rock and roll players, when they're doing glissando on piano, they'll use their thumb. They'll kind of like trap it like this, and they'll do it like that. There's advantages and disadvantages to doing this, and I'm going to give you all the disadvantages and advantages of the different ways, and I'll show you the way that I do it. Doing it this way, you get individual pitches. The way I do it is I take usually these two fingers and I'm sliding down the side of this finger. Now, on a sound that's monophonic, which this sound is, it doesn't make any difference. We're only going to hear one pitch, even though I'm holding down more than one note. If I choose a sound that's polyphonic, this classic square wave here, if I do it the thumb way, that's a very clean sound. If I do it my way with the side of my finger, it's a little bit more muddy because you're hearing 3 or 4 pitches at a time. I've always used the side of my finger. And the reason why I prefer using the side of my finger for going down and also in the way that I go up, and I'll show you that in a moment, is I don't like the way the quick, which is that little portion between the flesh of your finger and your nail, gets damaged by doing that. It just gets inflamed, turns red, and it hurts and makes you unhappy. So you want to avoid that. So for me, side of my finger, going up, I'm mostly using these fingers again, but I'm using from the knuckle here to the knuckle there. And then what I'll do is I'll rotate my hand at the last moment and hit my target note. That's how I do it. You know, other people do it different ways, and I'm going to show you some of those ways in a moment. Also, occasionally, rather than using these 2 fingers here, I'll use these 2 fingers to do it. And sometimes even 3 fingers. Now, there's something called palm glissando, and it looks like this. And you can go up and down. I'm just using my palm to perform the glissando. Organ players really love this. If you're playing an organ part and then you need to gliss across the keyboard, your hands essentially stay in a playing position, ready to go on the keys or chords or whatever you're playing. For lead lines, not such a big deal. Palm glissando doesn't really add a huge advantage. I can just go up with some fingers and then turn my hand over on that final note and be ready to play. But be aware and practice palm glissando, especially if you want to get into playing organ. I'm not much of an organ player. My buddy Brian, I don't know if he'll watch this video, he watches some of my videos. He's a heck of an organ player, and he probably uses palm glissando. So one last thing before I close here. If we're doing gliss across the sharps and the flats, essentially we're playing a version of F sharp pentatonic. If we're doing it across the natural notes, we're essentially playing either C major or A minor, and that might depend on what your chord structure is for your song. So what about other keys? Sometimes you can get away with just playing the natural notes, because gliss is usually pretty quick and it's not going to be very dissonant to your song, or generally it won't be. But if you want the gliss to, say, be in the key that you're using, you can always use transposition on your keyboard or in your DAW to make that happen. That's pretty much it. I hope this has been helpful for you. It's always tough to wear headphones. I can't hear myself. Hopefully I am actually saying something. All right. You should definitely practice if you want to get better at playing lead. And there's lots of things that you can do. I guess there is one more thing I could say. There are lots of great songs and great keyboard players out there. You know, I was always a big fan of the band Toto, Porcaro, and Page. They did a lot of lead. Things like Africa is a great song to listen to for lead. Stevie Winwood, I think I mentioned him already in the beginning. The Finer Things, While You See a Chance. There's some great leads in that, especially on While You See a Chance. That's a pretty ripping lead. It's a little bit more up-tempo. There's Borderline, which is a Madonna song. That has a really cool, very melodic lead right at the beginning of the song. And then again, about halfway through, there's a reprisal of that lead. Let's see, anything else? Follow You, Follow Me, great one. Tony Banks of Genesis did that. There are so many other great people, and if I didn't name some player that you love, Jan Hammer, great at playing synth lead, whether it's on, he used to play, I think, a Liberation portable, but you probably have your favorites, and you can throw their names in the comments. So go practice, have some fun, take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon. Thanks for watching.